It has been over a year since Tears of the Kingdom's first release, and about a year since I completed playing it. And I love this game to death. And I actually do have it in my top 3, if I'm being real. And even after I list all my problems and all my wishes that this game had, it's still pretty easily, to me, one of the most easy games to hop on, especially in the Zelda series. If not the easiest to hop back onto of any Zelda game, considering just how packed it is with content. Considering how easy it is to just get sucked back into the world and do some random quests, or do some Korok stuff, or just build some crazy contraption. And I think in my list of critiques that I'll be going over today, that I should have had probably a long time ago. The first of my critiques is easily fusing. The bow fuse menu in particular is one of the most obnoxious aspects of this game's basic game design. Because you can get into so many situations where you want to either try something new out, or you want to get to something specific, and it takes forever. It is such a pace breaker. It takes so long to get the right material you're looking for. Almost always, it's either some kind of damaging or some kind of homing object. Those are going to be the most common things you point to. And considering that, for the most part, I use this ability almost every fight I get into, it's a very, very confusing thing that this wasn't at least somewhat patched. Whether before development concluded or even after, during the few patches that we had after Tears of the Kingdom launched. The bow fuse menu in particular is easily the most egregious oversight to me in terms of basic gameplay. And I don't know how it wasn't at least a little tuned up. And another one about the fuse is that you can't fuse materials just from your inventory, which is such a confusing thing. Because having your fuse menu be so constant, and having fusing objects to your weapons be so constant, it feels like this is something they would add to be a lot easier to use. Because while you can pick things up and hold them, and then drop them on the ground, and then fuse them, it feels so strange that you can't just do it from your inventory. And it's especially weird that no matter what happens, and it's especially weird because this is an ability that is almost entirely based off of either a menu or a button prompt. And yet we couldn't get a menu prompt for fusing things to, say, your shield or your sword. But at the same time, we also couldn't get an inventory, a much more widespread inventory, for the bow fuse. The bow fuse feels like it should have been the easiest one to translate. Because to me, all it should do is bring up your inventory menu. But it doesn't. It's a scroll wheel. And that is wrong. Having it just be one line in a game that has over 100 different materials. That's filthy. There's absolutely so much more that could have been done in the most simple ways. And regarding fusing and unfusing, there should have just been a little thing. If your fuse material has just been added, there should have at least been an upgrade or an option to unfuse that material and get that material back. Because while it isn't a super common occurrence, you just gotta be vigilant, it can be pretty annoying to accidentally fuse an object to the wrong thing. And I think coming from that place of a feature that should have been there, a feature that I think should have been there but wasn't, I really wish there was a more in-depth build system at specifically the racetrack, because a big problem when it comes to building in this game is just how often things get misaligned. And I wish there was some kind of snapping feature or some way to freeze objects in midair at, say, the racetrack area that is entirely based on building different contraptions. It feels wrong that there isn't some kind of almost anti-gravity bubble around there. And I think for a good chunk of my initial playthrough, I actually didn't so much play with building, because it was so difficult to get everything properly aligned the way I wanted to. And I made, I think, some pretty cool things. I like the car that I use at my most basic. I think it's cool. I just wish there was an easier way to build it. I remember I actually built this thing in the depths. I initially built it in the depths, and it was not in a very sensible way. Partly, absolutely on me, but this contraption was absolutely just kind of cobbled together. And I wish there were more building slots. I wish there were more favorites. I wish there was more saved locations. Because this is so annoying to deal with. When I build a contraption, and then I look at the finished product, and I stare at it for a second. And I just have to accept that I'm gonna have to get rid of one of them. And it is so sad. And I think it's one of the reasons why we all kind of default to the hover bike. Because it's just so simple and so easy. And while we're always going to have our default options, our meta builds, if you will, the lack of a place to just set everything down and properly set things up in a very free space does contribute to, I think, a lot less people actually building things that they might want to build had they had the opportunity to more freely express that. And when it comes to builds, I really wish, considering just how many buttons are available on your controller when you're piloting a vehicle, I so desperately wish for more. I desperately wish for more things to be an option. Like, if my build has rockets on it, and I have a surplus of rockets, like 80 in the tank, part of me does wish that a little button prompt popped up. A little right trigger. A little RT or ZR, or whatever it is. I wish it popped up and asked if I wanted to refill and relaunch the rockets. But it would cost how many rockets I put on there. I think that'd be really nice. I would love to shoot across the sky. And I know, that's super busted. But is that not the point? If I have the materials to just spam rockets, why shouldn't I be able to? And that does go for other things. I do wish there was a way to turn off fans, like maybe that be a ZL or something. Maybe one of the bumpers. Maybe one of our other many buttons, like Y. Or maybe you just click the drive button again. I wish there was something more. I wish there was a better way to go about controlling the vehicles. And it feels weird that there's so many free options. Especially in a game that feels, when you're outside of a vehicle, every button has its purpose. You can click any button on the controller and it has a reason. So the fact that when you get on a vehicle, when you are actually on one of the things that you will likely be on for most of your traversing in your exploration, The fact that nothing gets used is kinda crazy. And now, I think this is my biggest one, and it'll probably be my only one that might jive with both myself and others, is half the dungeons and dungeon/temples were just underwhelming. I love the fire dungeon. The fire temple was really nice. I was a little bit stupid when I first went through it, but I enjoyed it. I love feeling stupid. When I feel stupid, it feels like a challenge, and I love it. That's why I play video games, for at least a slight bit of challenge. So when I feel stupid, I feel like it's a bit of a good game, at least just a little bit. So the fire temple really got me. I really enjoyed that one, probably the most of the dungeons and temples. But the water and the desert temple were super underwhelming, especially on replay through. I understand that it's almost certainly very difficult to design things in a game that lets you have so much freedom that you can't really anticipate everything the player can do. But damn, the desert temple was one of the most disappointing ones in a Zelda game. It felt like such a crazy ramp up too. You find Riju. You assist with guarding against the hordes of zombies, these Gibdos spawning from this giant mushroom. And you slowly take them all out one by one. Explosions, fire, water, electricity, constantly. And then you align the lights. You raise a pyramid from the ground. And you just kind of walk in. Legitimately, after all the setup, the desert temple is one that I could have skipped. And I feel like I would have been fine. It's okay. Final boss was kind of cool, but still significantly more underwhelming than I had anticipated, considering the build-up. The build-up was easily the best of the four. But still, so much more disappointing when you actually get under there. When you get under there, it feels like all the fun is over. And I don't have a fix for this. Because legitimately, what do you do when your players can set up nukes or flying machines and scale through the ceiling? What do you do? What do you do? Especially when they can just grab chunks of the environment. What do you do? How do you design for that? I am incredibly impressed with how good specifically the Fire Temple and specifically the Wind Temple is. I really like those two. They're definitely not making a top 5, but I do really like them. They are visually super cool and actually really did hold a lot of value to me. But considering that all 4 of the Divine Beasts and now 3 of the Tears of the Kingdom temples are this underwhelming and pretty disappointing, it says a lot on how much freedom the Zelda team has given us. And it's one of the most monkey paw type situations I could think of for a Zelda game. You get so much freedom. You get to explore at your leisure. You can move the very environment itself. You can fly through the sky on your very own contraption. You can send yourself hurling through the sky with bomb jumps after bomb jumps in Breath of the Wild. And your caveat, the big asterisk on this, is that you get a downgrade in level design. And God, I can understand both sides being too much to give and too much to gain to not do it. I can understand it. How do you balance for that? And I will not act as if I'm going to even have any other better ideas than them. Because it's just so much. And I'm sure most people could probably come up with some kind of dungeon with a simple problem and imagine it might be pretty fun. And then one jackass of a player, one jackass tester just walks in the room and clicks the leap through the ceiling button, and you completely fall to your knees in disappointment as you forgot one of the main abilities. Like, it is severely telling that freedom in a Zelda game is super hard to balance for when you're trying to create these super tight dungeons. It is more than understandable why these temple designs are pretty underwhelming. And I'm not gonna fault them for it, because frankly, there's an entire 7 Skyrims 7 Skyrim-sized environments in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. So I'm not exactly gonna fault them for it, because it just kinda makes sense. And there's still so much more to do. Lots more to do. And I think my final one is rain is still ass. There may be significantly better ways to scale massive walls now, but there's still so many occurrences of myself wanting to scale smaller building-sized walls, and then still being unable to climb and having to use building materials on a contraption to get me 12 feet off the ground. As if I'm buying something for $6 but only have $5 on me and need to use my card. It hurts. It sucks. Having to just put all that stuff away and bring out the big guns for the smallest of problems. This shit sucks. Please, let me climb. Why does the frog suit do nothing?